All right. Welcome everyone to the Duchess Len Parts on 2021. It's great to see that it's a climate neutral Microsoft Dynamics community event, and I'm happy to be here today speaking about uh, Power Platform. Thanks to our to the sponsors. Without them, the event wouldn't have been possible. So a big thank you to all the sponsors and the organizers for putting together this event. A little about me. My name is Anna Jhaveri, and I'm tech lead and partner at Soho Dragon India. I started my career working with SharePoint and then moved towards Microsoft 365 and Power Platform currently. So I have been a developer and architect in initial years of my career, and now more on managing the SharePoint team and the Microsoft 365 team and looking after the technical solutions for the projects that we implement. My Twitter detail and blog details are here just in case if you want to know about me. And I'm also a Power Automate community super user. There is some Microsoft Power Automate community, and like there are a lot of great people on that forum. If you have any questions related to Power Automates, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agents, or Power BI, there are great people out there answering the questions or addressing your issues. So do check that out. All right, so today's agenda. So what I'll share today is my learnings on I've been working with Power Platform since last 3 years, and what I have learned working on Power Automate is what I'll share in this session today on what the lessons I learned. So first is the lessons which I learned using the Power Automate approvals and how things should be done. So like I've used Power Automate approvals across multiple flows, and we've faced challenges on how to use it or how to extend it to customer requirements. So I'll share those my learning. And I have also extensively used Power Automate with SharePoint. So there are also some tips, tricks, and what is the best way of communicating with SharePoint from Power Automate. So I'll share that. In addition to that, I'll just share some general tips and tricks on developing better flows so that flows are more manageable and it's easier to maintain those flows. So first talking about Power Automate approvals. So there are two ways you can create Power Automate approvals. One is using the start and wait for approval actions. So when you want to like send approval to the users, you have options to like wait for all responses, wait for first response, uh, send approvals as email to the users, or send Teams notification for the approval, right? So you select multiple users in the assign to field, and then you select the approval type, whether you want to wait for all responses or just for the first response. And depending on that, the approval will be sent to the users, and the approval will behave in the flow. Then you can also send approval to the Teams channel. So for example, if you want to send an approval to the Teams channel, you create the approval just using the create an approval action, and then you post the output of the approval action as an adaptive card to Teams channel. But in this case, it will only work for first to respond scenario. So for example, if you want to wait for all responses of the approvers, then it won't work, because what happens is, for example, I have put an approval on Teams channel, and first approver comes in and provides their approval decision. For example, the first approver approves, then the adaptive card will change itself to approve decision, and then it will not allow the other users to approve and reject. So that's the one caveat. If you want to put approvals on the Teams channel, then only like one approval decision will work. So for example, if approval is sent to 5 users and you just need approval decision of that one approver, whoever does first, then in that scenario it would work. If you want to like do multiple approval decisions from multiple approvals for one specific approval from Teams channel. Currently, there is no way to do that. So keep that in mind on how you want to send the approvals in Teams. Whether you want to send to users as a message in Team, or if you want to send to a Teams channel. If you're sending to the users on team via flow bot or message, then multiple approvers will able to provide their decision on the same approval. But if you are using Teams channel, it will be just the first approver who approves that decision will only be considered, and other users will not be able to approve um, that approval. All right. So that was the one basic difference of sending the approvals to the users and the Teams channel in Teams. Then what lessons I learned while implementing the approve and reject. So for the scenario where everyone must approve, so for example, user rejects the flow will not wait and resume its execution. So for example, I have approve and reject and everyone must approve. In that case, if one of the approver rejects in between, so for example, I have sent it to 5 approvers, then first and second approver do approve it, but the third approver rejects, then the approval will not wait for decision of fourth and fifth approval. With one reject, the flow considering that the approval request has been rejected. So keep that in mind while you implement the everyone must approve option in your flow using the approval actions of flow. So in a case where you want to whether it is approved or whether it is reject. In that case, use the custom responses, wait for all responses, regardless of whether it is approved or reject. So, and then you can provide the response options as approved and reject. So rather than using everyone must approve, use wait for all responses. This is for a scenario where you want to get decision of all approvers, whether it is approve or reject. So for second has given approve, third and fourth has given like reject, and the fifth one has approved. And then probably want to like see that okay, three have approved and two have rejected, and the majority is like approved. Then the 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 flow goes ahead with approval decision. Just in case if you have that kind of scenario, use the wait for custom responses rather than everyone must approve. So this was one of the lessons that we learned, that okay, we wanted every approver to provide their approval response regardless of what other approver does. Okay, then one of the limitations is no reminder. So for example, when you are working with approvals, it is very common for even I'm using Nintex or anything else, it will have like any other approval things I will be using, it would have reminders, right? So for example, we've sent the approval to the user, but user does not perform any action on the approval for example 3 days. You may want the reminder to the approver that okay, this is one there is one approval waiting on you. There is no such built-in functionality of sending reminders in Power Automate approvals. In that case, what you can do is you can implement a separate flow with a recurrence trigger, and then that flow can like query the data wherever your approval data is stored to fetch the record.
Oh, I do not know about the others. Is it only me who lost the sound?
No, also me.
Oh, hello.
Now we can hear you again.
Yeah. Maybe
You
can
can't
we?
hear me?
Yeah, we had a problem with the connection. Maybe can we try to switch off the video and picture transmission? Maybe that makes it better. Yeah, Anna, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay. So seems we have a connection problem.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you again.
Okay, is it good now?
Now is good, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what went wrong. And the screen is still visible, right?
Yes, yeah.
All right. Okay, great. Uh, create the reminders. Probably you can create a new flow with a recurrence trigger. It determine whether a reminder needs to be sent for the records for which a pool has been created. So that is how you need to do. One of the card for user to approve and reject. A user will have to like search the original email of approval or original along with the reminders. I can't send the approval card to the user where from the reminder it says they could approve and reject. They can't do that. They'll need to like search for the original one. So that is kind of a little clunky. I hope some better approaches come in near future for implementing reminders for Power Automate approvals. But for now, it should work that they are being sent the reminders and they have to look for the original approval message, whether it be an email or a Teams message. All right. So sometimes you may also have a requirement that okay, approval needs to be assigned. You want to assign the approval to a group, but the approach you can implement it. You can first fetch the users. There are actions available in Power Automate using which you can fetch the users of the group. For example, there is an action available to fetch the users of AD groups or M365 groups or SharePoint groups. Fetch the list of the users and then store it in an array. And then you can use that array in the assign to field of approval action. So you can't directly use the groups in the group and then use that array in the approval action. For there was for one of our customers there was email security implemented using Mimecast, which was blocking the approval adaptive card. So with email security, the approval looked like this, where in the email, where user would get this buttons, and then if they click on this button, the browser would open, and then the Power Automate approvals functionality. User can directly provide that or reject decision from the email. It shouldn't take the user to the browser, so it should be this was one interesting issue that we faced with one of the clients where email security was turned on and it was blocking this actionable messages. These are called actionable messages in Outlook. So we had to like bypass the security for approval emails in Mimecast to work with a of support to this is also like someday if you come across such issues, then you specify environment which might be blocking the actionable messages in Outlook. So that was a good learning. Then this is also one most and your flow runs beyond 30 days. So for example, you have 5 approval levels in your flow. And for example, user may take like a week to approve. Then the flow right. So like the limitation of the flow is once the 30 days have passed, so your approval will be lost. For example, after 30 days, approver comes and provides their approval decision on that approval, the flow will not go ahead and the approval will get cancelled. So in that case, you may want that flow instance to run. Might have multiple levels of approval implemented in. So it is for flow to run beyond 30 days. So the flow will time out after 30 days, and this will affect the pending approvals. So as an alternative approach, what you can do is you can use a parallel action, and then you can configure the run after run. There is for each of the actions in Power Automate, there is a run after option, and then in run after option, you can select that okay when flow time state your approval so that whenever the flow restarts, it knows okay where it needs to go so that it does not. So for example, there are 5 levels of approval. First and second level of approval is completed and your flow is on third level of approval. Now your flow times out on the third level of approval, and your flow, for example, you have implemented the logic of that configure run up after timeout, and then you rerun that flow instance. In that case, the approval should start from the third level, right? Because the first and the second level have already been completed. So like in your database, you know the for the flow to know where it should resume. So get access, you can refer to this video, and there is a great help provided in video on how to. One most practical that you might face while using flows in general, even not even with approval, or the like in real scenario, the flow may run beyond 30 days, and how to keep your flow instance running by restarting the flow.
Anna? Anna?
Hello.
Now we can hear you. Can you try to to deactivate the ingoing video to see if that helps?
I turn off my video.
If you press the 3 buttons, the second last is called yeah. Can you do that?
Yeah, turn off income.
Can you try to say something again?
Hello.
I heard you say hello.
Yeah, what can we
Hello.
do? Yeah.
Hello.
We can hear you now.
Okay.
Another, do you have probably a different
Sorry
headset?
for the inconvenience. I'm not sure why is the connection acting. I'm not sure what's the issue, but yeah, let me try changing the headset. Hello, is it good now?
Yeah, this one sounds good. Yeah. Okay, let's continue.
Okay, yeah, I hope it goes well. No, I'm sorry. Yep. So yeah, I was mentioning about approval timeout. So whether you are approvals in flow or not, it is a very real business scenario that your flow instance may like go beyond 30 days, and you want that flow instance working rather than it being timeout. Implement large flow to flow instance restart from that from the last level the flow had timeout. So you'll need to store the data in your database in such a way that you can restart the flow and have the flow resume from where it had timeout. So there's a really good video from Reza Dorani on how you can do that. So once you get the hold of the slides, you can refer to this link here provided as reference. And one of the approver is on vacation, in that case, the approval needs to be delegated to another user, right? So that's also a very real business scenario where the approval are needed to be delegated to other users. So, but that's a very currently. So, for example, if I am the user, I have an option to reassign from the Power Automate approvals in browser, and I can reassign to someone else. But I can't implement a logic that okay, if I'm on vacation, the approval get to someone else, or an admin comes in and they cannot assign my approvals to someone else. So that functionality is still like missing in Power Automate approvals. So you may want to like consider that before creating approvals from your Power Automate flows. So like consider on this on things like whether your approvals will run for more than 30 days, or whether your approval will require reminders, your approval require how you're going to process the responses of the approvers, whether it is only first to respond or everyone must provide their decision. So consider of all of this parameter doing approvals in Automate. Then also while we were doing approvals, while we were testing approvals in Flow, we came across a retype policy for approval actions that even if the flow was running and somehow the flow were getting flow was creating the approvals again and again for the same approver because of the retry policy. So like we had to turn off the retry policy for approval action because the flow was behaving like really odd and it was creating approval for the same user again and again from the same action because of some retry policy it had. So we had turned it's a good idea to turn off the retry policy for approval actions. The retry policy is really good for the HTTP actions where a request is sent to a URL and then that did not succeed and the flow tries to do it again. So it is really good for the any HTTP based actions, but for approval, I don't think it is kind of very much required property. So you can it's good to turn off the retry policy for the approval actions to avoid any mess up of creating the same approval again and again. All right. So that was all about Power Automate approvals. You may need to think of all the such parameters like how the approval, how you are going to process the approval responses, whether do you need whether your approval needs the reminders or not, how long will your flow run, then whether you need delegation capabilities, and also like turn off the retry feature if you don't need for the approvals. So do consider all of these parameters while designing approvals in your flow. All right. So some of the lessons learned now I'll share about Power Automate and SharePoint integration on how you can best access SharePoint when you in using one of the lessons that we learned like in SharePoint we have like SharePoint list to store the data, and then in SharePoint list like if you want to update data in SharePoint there are two ways to do that. One is provide update item action which is automate, and then there is another action which is send an HTTP request to SharePoint. So you can use REST API in send the item. So what are the differences between using both of the actions? You can perform the same operation of updating the update item in SharePoint list, but what are the differences? So update item requires you to. So for example, if I'm using the update item, here I'll be able to better explain. So this is the update item and this is the send HTTP. In update item, what happens is if I want to update an item, even if I don't want to update this title value, I'll have to provide the value of this title value because it is a mandatory field. So like I'll have to provide the value of this title value because it is a mandatory field. So whatever value I provide, it will get updated in using the update item action. So that is the one caveat of using the update action. And like if I don't want to do that, then I can create a separate view which does not have that title field. That way I'll create that, I'll select that view here instead of the all items, and then the title. If the title field is not added to that view, I'll not have to provide the value of the title field. But then you might be updating your item in your flow multiple times, and then you may have to create all the views based on what items you want to update, right? So that's like little cumbersome that it requires to create multiple views if you don't want to provide the values for the fields which you don't want to update, right? In that case, send HTTP request is flexible that okay, I just want to update the value of the approved field, then here I have to just provide the value of the approved field. No other values needs to be provided for the other columns. So that is more flexible in that terms, and you don't have to create separate views to do that. So that's one thing. But update item is very user friendly. So for example, if someone doesn't know REST API, then also they can like use the update item action to update the values of a list item. Here you need to know a little about like REST API, how to build the JSON values to provide the values of the columns. So that you need to know. need to know a little of the syntax. It's not very hard, but still there is a little learning curve on that area. Then we also came across, like when using update item, if the columns that we did not provide the value, for example, link is not a mandatory field, and I'm not providing the value of the link here, and the link field in my update using this update item was setting as blank. So even I don't want to provide the value of the link column, and I'm not providing the value because I don't want to update its value. But then when I did not provide it the value of the link column, it was getting updated to a blank, which is kind of unexpected. That something I don't want to update was updating to a blank value. Here in API, there are columns that you need to update. So you can rest assured using that approach that nothing like go wrong in your data, like the one that had gone wrong for us, that not providing a value of a column made it to a blank value. So yeah, so it was same HTTP has REST API learning curve. But once you get hold of that, it will become really easy and flexible to update the data in SharePoint using REST API as compared to the out of box section. And sometimes if you don't have a list with a lot of columns, then update item should also work in most of the cases unless you are facing the issue. But there is an alternative of using send HTTP request using REST API. So I would say that's the best option, and it worked for us. Then the trigger conditions. So the trigger conditions have been really helpful to us while implementing the approvals. So one of the best thing that does is it saves you flow runs so that your flow does not like trigger when you don't want it to be triggered. So that is really good. It also helps you in terms of licensing, because there are, like, for example, if you're using Microsoft 365 licenses for the users to run the Power Automate flows, and then there are like 2,000 runs available per day, and then you have a lot of like thousands of data in your list, and the list is very busy, users are updating it, and it may reach 2,000 flow runs per day easily. So in that terms, you can use trigger conditions, so you can only trigger your flow whenever it requires, and it does not trigger on every update of the item. So it is commonly used when you are using the trigger that when an item is created or modified, and you can save the flow runs and also unhelpful flow history where you don't want the flow to run. There will be like long flow history created, which has no purpose there. So what really helps with the flow runs if you're limited on licenses. So that was a really good thing that we used in our Power Automate flows. Then one of the good action that we came across is get changes. So for example, you want to do some processing in your flow only when a specific column value has been changed by the user. So in that case, you need to use the trigger that when an item or a file is modified, and then add the get changes for an item action, and then provide this parameter values. And then in the condition action, you'll get option to check whether the specific column value has changed. And then in the yes branch of the condition action, you can implement your logic. So for example, user has changed the value of column X, and the on change of value of column X, you want to perform some actions in your flow. That is when this is useful. But this using this action requires turning on versioning on your list and library, otherwise it will give an error. So keep that in mind. Also, like you can go a step ahead in this approach that, okay, you want to compare the previous value, what user had set in the item for the columns, and you want to like also compare the current values. So if you want to compare the previous and the current value, you need to get the values of previous version using REST API. So you can also do that. So there is an approach to do it, that using a REST API, you query the values of previous version, and then you get the current version values from the trigger. Excuse me. So you could do some that kind of logic where you want to compare the values of what user had previously put in and what they have currently put in. So this get changes action was also very helpful to us in building our flows while working with SharePoint, of course. So the get items could be the most common used actions when you are working with SharePoint to get the data from SharePoint. So a few tips of using the use of filter query when you are using this action. It does not fetch all the data from the list. If it does, then it can only query like 500 items at a time, and then it will make your flow slow. So only fetch what you need. So whatever you need, provide that in filter query, and the flow will only fetch those data. In filter query, you have to use internal column names and values in specific format. So for example, you are seeing that I'm formatting the date and time value here. So need to take care. So you need syntax on the filter queries. There is good Microsoft documentation available on how to provide this filter query and learning its syntax. So good documentation available on that for your help. Then also I would recommend that use number of rows, like limit the number of rows on what you want to process in the flow, so that you are not querying unnecessary rows of data. Use the top count property. Then also avoid apply to each if your get items is expected to return one or two items. So for example, if you are using get items, and your that get items is expected to return only one item, then just for getting the value of that one item, you don't need to use the apply to each. You can use the first function in the expressions to get the value of that first record. So using many apply to each loops in your flow will make it slow and will affect the performance of your flow. So keep that in mind. Also keep that in mind that you cannot use calculated column in the filter query. So if you want to further like filter data based on calculated columns of SharePoint, you'll need to use filter array action after the get items action to get the filtered data. But always process the filtered data. Don't get all the data from the SharePoint. Always use the top count to process only those to just get whatever you need in your flow. So that will save you flow performance, and your flow will not run slow. So keep this in mind while using get items action. Also, it is recommended that you index the column in SharePoint list which are used in the filter query, so that the queries are more faster. So these are all great tips to like make your flow faster to run when using the get items action. So as I mentioned that in calculated columns, you will not be able to do the filter query. In that case, after the get items action, use the filter array, and then you can filter items using the filter array action, and then you can do the apply to each. And of course, if you know that your that your filter array is not going to give you more than 1 or 2 records, then don't use apply to it. Just use the direct index or first function in the expressions to get the records from get items or filter array. All right. So as I mentioned that in the get changes slide, as I mentioned that if you want to like compare the values of the previous, what user had entered previously and what are the current values, you can get the version history of the item using REST API. So this is the call that you need to make, where you provide the title of the list, and then you provide the item ID, and then you provide what version value that do you need, and then you can get the value of the version. So this is useful when you want to compare the previous value and the current value. So a very practical business scenario, sometimes you might need this in your flow. So it is possible to do that. Then, as I mentioned in get items, you have to internal column names. So what are internal column names? For example, you will have title field in your list, but for example, I rename my title field to email because I'm storing email values in that title field. But still, the internal name of that field would still remain title. So if I want to filter by email in my filter query, where I have renamed the title field to email, I'll still be using title column name in my filter query, not the email column name. So like even if I'm doing a filter query or if I'm doing REST API to update the value of the title column of the email column or title column, I have to use the internal field name. So the best way of knowing the internal field name of a field in SharePoint list, go to the list settings, click on the column, and then here, as I've shown you, look at the URL and find field equals to the name. Whatever name you find here is the internal name of the column. So keep that in mind. That will save you time on like why is your flow not working even if you have provided the right column name. So keep that in mind. All right, so that were like good lessons learned while we were working with SharePoint on Power Automate flows. Now, these are some general tips and tricks on using Power Automate. So as I mentioned before, avoid using apply to each whenever you can, because apply to each will make your flow slow. So avoid using that. If you know your array or your get item section or filter array action is going to return one or two records, or you can just use the zero element or first or second element, or you can use the expression, which is expression function first, which is available to fetch the values. So for example, here I have action called get tables, which is an Excel action, and I want to get the value of the ID column. What I'm doing is I'm first getting the first row which is written by the get tables, and I'm fetching the value of the ID column, so that I know that this action is going to return me only one row. So I don't need to use apply to each. Just using this expression here, it will give me the value of the ID column of the first row in get tables. So avoid using apply to each. So this work with any type of collection you have in Power Automate. And then you can also use select and join operations to process your collection more rather than using the apply to each action. And also avoid using too many variables in apply to each loop. We've observed that using variables like using set variable action in apply to each loop or append to variable action, make the flow use more compose actions to, if you want to do some processing in the apply to each loop, use compose actions rather than using variable actions. Like apply, we've observed that applied to each makes the flow performance so slow. So as much as you can use avoid using it. So trick one to avoid apply to is, here this is an inefficient, but this is an efficient approach here. The inefficient one, what it does is it gets the item from the SharePoint list. It needs the string of email addresses for SharePoint list in a comma separated value. So here I'm doing apply to each row and then setting the variable for each email address. Rather, what I can do is I can use select and compose action, no apply to each here, right? I'm just joining the values of email addresses by semicolon using these two actions. So there are options to not to use apply to each. So this is one thing. Then whenever your flow is, the tip to is like whenever your flow is triggered by the user, where, for example, if you're using button flow or you are using for selected item or power app action in your flows, the flow will run under the current user, not the, it will not run under the user who created the flow. And this could sometimes cause permission issues. So for example, like if my flow is triggered from power app, and whatever my flow is doing, the user who triggered the flow from the power app does not have permissions to update the record in SharePoint, for example, then my flow will fail. So in that case, what you can do is you can create a parent flow which has a power app action, and then you can create a child flow which performs that elevated operation in the flow, like updating the item in SharePoint list, and then call the child flow from the parent flow. That what that will do is it will trigger the child flow using the using the permissions of author of the flow. It won't use the context of the current user who triggered the flow from power app. So that way you can avoid errors in your flow when you want to do something elevated, some elevated privileges operation on the flow which actual user does not have permissions to do.
Anna?
So there are two ways of calling the child flow from a parent flow. One is, yeah, hello, can you hear me?
We are running out of time now.
Okay, I just have like 5 minutes. Is it okay?
No, we are already 3 minutes late. Could you do it a little faster?
Yeah, just 2 minutes there. Yeah, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. That's okay.
Yep. All right. Then the other trick is using Outlook actionable messages. So if you want input from the user from email, you can use actionable messages. Actionable messages are like implemented using adaptive cards. So you need to develop two flows using one which sends the adaptive card in the email, then the other which takes the input of the user from the adaptive card. So this is non-approval email, like it does not involve approval, but you generally want to take some feedback from the user from the email. That is how you can also do that using adaptive cards and using creating two flows for those adaptive cards. But this requires like use of premium connector, so keep that in mind. Then also, for example, you're using some passwords or you are using some API key in your flow, it's good to secure the input and output of your flow. So from the flow run history, no one can see those API keys with what you have used in your flows. So it will protect the confidential data. And also one of the good feature of flows is you can do error handling, so that you get notified about your failed flows before the user comes to you that saying that your flow has failed. So this is the run after action, that okay, if your action has failed, you can do something to handle the error. So you can you can like send yourself an email when your flow fails. So that is how you can implement error handling. So some other general tips are using compose action instead of variables, as I mentioned before, checking for null values when you're getting data from the external source, then use expressions instead of switch or apply to each actions to save the flow for performance. Then name the actions appropriately so that after 6 months you don't forget your flow is what your flow is doing. Use service accounts in your connection rather than using actual accounts, because like user may get deactivated and your flow will get orphaned. So use service accounts in your connections. And then you can create the flow with service account and share with the co-owners who need to further edit the flow. All right, so thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry to go over by 5 minutes, but it was great. I had fun presenting it. Thank you for your time and attending this session.
And thank you for joining, Anna. And I think it wasn't your fault we had the technical issues. So thank you very much for joining. And big applause to Anna.
Yeah, this was really interesting. This was really some good tips and tricks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.